This is Dr. Chris Clayton from Clayton Hypnosis Clinic. Thank you for joining us on our third episode of Hypnosis Chat. This is a weekly broadcast where we chat about hypnosis, hypnotherapy, personal change, meeting your goals, getting over problems or issues. So if you have any questions, feel free to email in. I've got my tab here. The email is info@claytonhypnosisclinic.com. I have with me, once again, the beautiful Anjoli Ferrara. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So today we've got a few kind of interesting things to talk about, and I'm sure some miscellaneous things will come up also. So Anjoli, I believe you have a question for me?
Yes, actually, I have a question. Basically, I suffer from a little bit of driving anxiety. I'm driving a lot back and forth in the summertime, and with long trips and the highway.
Sure.
So I was wondering how hypnosis could help me to get over that.
Great question. And anxiety is one of the things that I work with most frequently. And driving anxiety is definitely in the top 2 or 3 of anxiety. So that's a very frequent stress that people have. And so let's talk for a second about, and this is something we touched on last week, but it definitely bears repeating. There's essentially 3 states that your brain can be in. You can be comfortable, you can be underactive, like bored, lonely, depressed, etc. You can be overactive, stressed, angry, afraid, etc. So basically whatever emotions or mental states you have, they're all in one of those 3 categories. Every state that your brain can be in is in one of those 3 categories: comfortable, underactive, or overactive. So, interestingly, there is a specific way that your brain thinks about activities that give them that impression, either the stressed, bored, or comfortable impression. And probably the most important thing to realize is that nothing is inherently stressful or boring or comfortable. Like, some people love jumping out of airplanes. Some people love driving. Some people love stamp collecting. Some people love things that, are under the spectrum. Some people love over. And it generally has nothing to do with our brains or our neurology. We are 99% neurologically identical. We're actually 98-something% neurologically identical to monkeys. So with humans, there's very little physical difference in our brains and nervous system. So what the vast majority of that impression comes down to is how you're in the habit of thinking about that activity, in this case, driving. So there are basically 3 ways of thinking about any activity. And I think I went over these last week, so I'll just briefly go over them this time. The comfortable way, which is imagining doing something successfully, like being in the middle of doing it and doing it successfully. If you think about anything that you already like doing, that you're already comfortable doing, that you're already motivated to do, you will notice that your normal way of thinking about it is being in the middle of doing it and doing it successfully. The anxiety-producing way is kind of the opposite. You're still in the middle of doing it, only now you're imagining something going wrong or some bad thing happening. So let's do that with you, for example, and you just be totally honest with me about how you think about it. So I want you to go back in your mind to a time that you had anxiety about driving. It could have been before you started driving. It could have been while you were driving. When is it usually worse, before you start or while you're doing it?
I would say while I'm doing it.
Okay, while you're doing it. Okay. So for some people, anticipatory anxiety is stronger, and for some people, while you're doing it is stronger. So I want you to notice that, and we have not really talked about this in depth recently, so I don't know what she's going to say. We haven't planned any of this out. So I want you to go back to a time in your mind when you were driving and you had anxiety about it. Okay? So I want you to notice, so think about how you're thinking about it. You feel the anxiety? Okay, good. So I want you to notice, so you're imagining being in the middle of doing it, right? And what is it that's going wrong, or what's the consequence? Are you imagining hitting another traffic or losing control or somebody doing something? What is it that you're imagining?
I'm imagining a lot of those things that you just said.
Okay.
Maybe even all of them.
Okay, you're the movie director. Now here, just imagine you are making a movie of a fear of driving. And you have to have the scene where you're really portraying to the audience this fear of driving. Okay, so you're the movie director. You need to portray what's going on in your head onto the screen. So describe it for me. Sell me on this movie. So you're driving down the road. What's going on?
I'm driving down the road. All of a sudden, there's a standstill, and it looks like it's very, I mean, it's going to be like a long, like 5-10 mile backup. That could be.
I'm already getting scared. All right, go ahead.
But then afterwards, suppose you have a lot of erratic drivers on the road. That could be something else. Or, and maybe the time of day too, for me. Like night driving is always a little more stressful. And the weather conditions, a lot of things.
So it's dark and it's raining. What are you imagining differently? Like not being able to see what's going on?
Yeah, hydroplaning mostly.
Okay. So, it's interesting. I was just going to talk about the basics, but you're bringing up so many good points. Like you could really do a great scene in a movie. Okay. Now, so much to talk about. All right. So first of all, the basic problem is that you're imagining things going wrong. You don't have to do that. And really there's nothing, it's not good or bad that you're imagining things going wrong. It's not right or wrong. It's not true or false, because sometimes those things happen, sometimes they don't happen. It's not true or false that that is the right image. It is only more or less useful for how you want to feel about driving. So if you remember from previous episodes, your brain thinks, feels, and acts, and it does it in that order. Short version, you don't feel anything until you think a certain way first. So if you imagine all these bad things happening, it's going to equate to having certain feelings. So the only difference, or the only important thing, is how useful is that type of thinking to your life. Do you want those feelings? Do you not want those feelings? Obviously, in this case, you don't. So that's the basic thing. Now, the next thing is, for each of those three types of thinking, the boredom, comfort, and stress, there's a multiplier. And this is where it gets a little more intermediate and I think interesting. So there's the basic way of creating anxiety, which is imagining something going wrong. And then there's the multiplier, which is piling on something else and piling on something else. Oh, well, what if there's also erratic drivers? What if it's also dark? What if it's also raining? And your brain's like, and then you can't handle it. So here's the thing. That process is completely under your control, whether you recognize it or not. It's just a matter of, are you in the habit of doing that process and having anxiety, or are you in the habit of doing it sort of in what I call a normalized way, which is just, like for example, imagine driving down the road, you're in control of the car. It's almost like the cars aren't moving because you're all going basically the same speed. Even if a car is going a lot faster than you, it's probably only going 5 or 10 miles an hour faster than you. So it's like a car driving by at 5 or 10 miles an hour. So everything's kind of still, you're moving along, you're in control. Notice how you don't have anxiety about that. So now notice that's also not true or false. Sometimes driving conditions are like that, sometimes they're not. So the point is, what do you want your image to be when you normally think about driving? Most people, if they're not afraid of driving, if they don't have any anxiety about driving, they have kind of a normalized way of thinking about it, where you're driving, you're in control, everything's fine, it's well within your capability. And just because you intellectually know it's within your capability doesn't mean that's what you're going to imagine. One other really interesting thing is that everyone basically has three aspects to reality. You have yourself, you have the outside world, and you have your brain or your unconscious. And your unconscious is essentially a machine. It's a series of machines that do all your automatic work for you. It doesn't make decisions. It's like a computer or a machine. It doesn't make decisions. It just runs a program or runs in a mechanical way. You, the conscious mind, are the one that makes the decisions and plans everything out. Your brain will take care of things automatically, like a computer, but you can at any time step in and change the settings. So, and it's not difficult to do. It's not, you notice when I said imagine going down the road and it's bright and you're in control, it wasn't difficult to do that. It's just that you don't do it automatically. You're not in the habit of doing that. A lot of people have the pattern where you have an anxiety, and then your brain's like, oh, let me help. by making even more anxiety and thinking about all the anxious things at once. And there are some situations where that might be useful. Like if you have to come up with a problem for how something works, like, okay, I'm about to do this thing. What are the problems that could happen? There is a useful time for that. But if you overuse it, you're going to have anxiety all the time. So you are the boss of your brain. You are the one that decides when you use the anxiety thing and when you use the comfort thing. So if you decide, because you're the smart one and your brain knows that you're the smart one, if you decide that you will be better off having confidence about driving, and you usually will because you'll drive better if you're confident about your driving, then it's your job to step in and say, okay, this is how we're going to think about driving. Your brain will do, and so that's the first phase, the planning phase. The second phase is that your brain will do automatically whatever you do 51+% of the time. So whatever you do most often, your brain will start doing automatically. So what that means is, now hypnosis is essentially amplified mental practice. So it makes that process either instantaneous or much, much faster. Without hypnosis, the second best thing is to practice it and do it over and over until you get used to it. And that might take a few days or a few weeks or whatever. So the bottom line is, once you've decided how you're going to think about it, you have to get used to that and make that the new habit. So for example, and one tool for doing that is, which we also use in hypnosis, is what's called future pacing, which is just imagining doing it correctly in the future. So for example, imagine, let's see, do you have a trip coming up in the future?
Yes, actually, in a few weeks.
Okay, good. All right, so here's what I want you to do. And feel free to do this at home if you've got your own anxiety. I want you to, we'll do it both ways. So we'll do it in the anxiety-producing way, and we'll do it in the comfort way. We don't have to, we're not worried about tedium this time. That's the other side. It's just not an important issue for this. For other things, tedium is important, like motivation, for example. But in this case, we're just working with comfort and anxiety. So we'll do it both ways. Notice neither way, again, neither way is right or wrong. It's every single thing your brain can do, including create anxiety, is useful in some context. If you're ever too reckless about something, if you ever don't think carefully enough about something, that's a situation where a little bit of anxiety can help push you in the right direction. But if you overuse that tool, if you're using the hammer on everything, it's not going to be useful for your life. So it's your job as the carpenter, the foreman, to decide what tool to use in what situation. So we'll do it both ways. So first we'll do it the old way, the anxiety-producing way. So we're going to imagine in this trip that you've got coming up, okay, you're driving. What was the first thing? Like it's standstill. And then there's erratic drivers, and then it's dark, and then it's raining. Okay?
It's like a movie.
It ramps it right up, right? Yeah. Okay, so notice it's a very mechanical process. This is so important. We talked about this last time. Your brain is mechanical. The reason that's so important is because it means that it doesn't happen randomly, and it's within your control. So it's not like, oh, this time I thought about being at a standstill, erratic drivers, dark and rainy, and I felt great about it. That never happens. Your brain is very mechanical. It does the same thing with the same input, like a computer. So that means that if you can identify the wrong input and the right input, you can change how you feel about something. So it's very mechanical. We were able to just control it just like that. It's very controllable. That's what it comes down to. The more mechanical something is, the more easily you can control it. And your brain is very, very mechanical. So, okay, so we've got this other way where we're amping up the anxiety. And then we've got this other way where you're driving down the road and you're in control. And here, watch what we're going to do here. You're driving, you're in control, and then you get to your location successfully. Wow, that was a lot different, wasn't it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and it sounds basic to someone who maybe doesn't have that, but anyone who has anxiety, like that's a very different way of thinking. Oh, hey, you're driving, you're in control, and then you get to your destination effectively. Can you imagine if that was the only way you ever thought about driving?
Wow.
You can. It's super easy. All you have to do is practice and get used to that new way of thinking. And the interesting thing is, it's actually easier than the other way. Generally speaking, a normalized way of thinking about something is easier than the complex, fear-inducing way of doing something. It's just like when you walk into a room and you automatically turn a light on just because it's habit. It's actually easier physically to walk into the room without turning a light on. It requires less energy. It's just that you're not used to doing that. It's the same thing here. And then once you get used to doing it, it's no problem. You just walk into the room. It's the same thing here. It's actually easier to imagine doing something in a non-anxiety producing way. It's just that you're not used to that yet. So it's just a matter of getting used to it. Here's the reason why everyone doesn't do this. This is why this is not common knowledge and everyone's problems are already solved. Again, the brain just thinks, feels, and acts. And when you want to change something, you always want to change a feeling or a behavior. Either there's something that you feel good about that you want to feel bad about, like something bad like junk food, or there's something bad, it's the reverse, like something you feel bad about that you want to feel good about, like driving. Or it's a behavior, something that you want to do more of or something you want to do less of. So those are all the things that people want to change. The problem is all those things are determined by your thinking. So when people go to try to change the feeling or behavior directly, it doesn't work because the thinking is naturally creating the feelings which create the behavior. You can force yourself to behave or even feel in a certain way for a short period of time, but because you've got this thinking that's constantly encouraging the machine to do it a certain way, you're always going to go back. So you can't keep up this inequality between the thinking, feeling, and behaving forever. And usually it's a very short amount of time. So you always have to change the thinking first. And people we don't learn to do that. So that's why most people never change important things they need to change in their life. Okay, so from this point, you now know the difference. Never again will you not know the difference. Never again will you not realize that you're in control. And never again will you not know the difference between thinking about driving in an anxiety-producing way and thinking about driving in the normalized way. The normalized way is easier. So it's almost like, oh, it can't be that easy. It is that easy. That's how easy it is. You just have to get used to it. You have to practice it and get used to it, just like any other skill in the universe. So what I would say at this point, again, hypnosis's job is to kind of install things to make that second half much easier. Sans hypnosis, it would just be a matter of practicing, encouraging yourself, telling yourself, just like training a puppy or learning a new skill in some way. Okay, so it was a little bit of a long-winded answer, but that's such an important one because so many people have anxiety today. I was telling Anjoli I've been in business for over 16 and a half years now. And for the first 13 or 14 years, the main things people wanted were quitting smoking and losing weight. And there's still a lot of that, but for the last 2 or 3 years, it has been eclipsed by people who have anxiety. I see people have anxiety all the time, and it's the same kind of process. It's the same thing. So it's really important, I think, for everybody to understand how it works and to know that it can be changed. You can feel comfortable about just about anything.
Question.
Yes, absolutely.
Is hypnosis kind of like a Tylenol, or is there a way to permanently exterminate anxiety from your...
That's a good question. Hypnosis is the only thing that's not a Tylenol. Okay? Everything else is a Tylenol. What do I mean by that? Again, back to the idea of changing your behavior or your feeling and not changing the supporting thinking. If you don't change the supporting thinking, it's not going to work. And I did overstate that a little bit. You can change the thinking and practice really hard and spend a lot of time and energy and effort and really get it solved permanently. Hypnosis is really just a way to do that more efficiently. As opposed to, obviously, most of the psychological and psychiatric world is either talk therapy, which really never changes your thinking. There was a very famous study where people who enter psychiatry, a third of them get better, a third of them stay the same, and a third of them get worse. And then, of course, drugs, at the very most, all they can do is make you feel better about it, dull the anxiety. Once you've already created it, it's like building your house on a volcano and having like buckets of water drop on it every day. It's why not move your house off the volcano? So that's my job. So the short answer is hypnosis is the best way and really the most efficient way to make permanent changes so that, your thinking naturally leads to the feeling and the behavior that you want.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, okay, let's see. We've got a few emails here. Let's see. We've got from Emily, what is age regression and what does it have to do with hypnosis? So different topic. Usually when age regression is mentioned, it refers to using the hypnosis is a natural effect where it increases your recollection. So for example, normally we're thinking about a bunch of different things, like a light bulb. The rays are all going in different directions, as opposed to a laser where it's all focused down. Normally, when we're awake, our attention is diffused to a certain extent. Like you can never really focus a lot when you're awake. Our natural state is to be very diffused. In hypnosis, it allows all that to come down and focus on one task. And whatever you make that one task works better. So that's another way of explaining how hypnosis works. So you can focus it on memory and you can remember a lot more about your past. So usually when they're referring to age regression, I think is a misnomer. It's really about better recollection. And usually it's most used for two things. It's used to help people find things that were lost. I once had one of the most sort of memorable examples. Somebody lost their car, their SUV in Norfolk. I guess they took a taxi home and they forgot where they went, and they just literally could not find their car at all. And they came to hypnosis. We found it through hypnosis. And then the other main use is, and it's actually, there are some interesting similarities. The other main use is for the police to help get details from witnesses to a crime. And and we've done that also. I worked with the Norfolk police, and it's interesting because it was a similar situation where there was a hit and run, and there were a lot of people around, but no one could remember the license plate. And I worked with someone who said they saw the license plate, but it just slipped their mind, and we actually ended up getting the license plate, and as a result, the person was apprehended. So that's another good use for it. I've actually worked with the Norfolk police a number of times with similar types of things. So thank you, Emily, for that question. All right, so let's see. What did you have another question?
Would that last thing be considered forensic hypnosis?
Forensic hypnosis.
Is there a such thing?
Yeah, you could call that forensic hypnosis. It's not like forensic hypnosis is a specific. It's just kind of a word they use sometimes
just
too.
My curiosity.
Yeah. No, interesting. Yeah, you could definitely. That would be the closest thing to forensic hypnosis. There's really no other forensic use for hypnosis other than interviewing witnesses. It's not about forcing someone to tell the truth. That's a myth. It's really the only use in forensics for hypnosis is memory recollection. I mean, unless you're using it for some therapeutic use to help somebody solve a problem. But definitely memory enhancement would be the most common use for forensic hypnosis.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, all right. Let's see. So did you have another question?
Yes, it's completely off the subject of anxiety, actually. This might not even be something hypnosis can solve. What about physical ailments? Because there are a lot of psychosomatic things going on.
Yeah.
What about physical ailments? What if you're consistently tired all the time, or you just...
That's probably simpler to answer than you imagine. It's really just if the, like a psychosomatic problem is a physical problem that starts in the mind. And it could even be like an ulcer. Could have, that's a very basic version where you have a lot of anxiety and stress, and you get an ulcer. And certainly hypnosis can help that. Obviously, it can't help the ulcer, but it can help prevent ulcers through stress management. So the answer is actually simpler than you might think. If you're having a sleeping problem, that's something that we work with all the time, as we talked about last week. Also, even more so getting even more physical, there's pain management, which I've worked with quite a bit, where you can do basically two things. There's two main uses for pain management with hypnosis. The first is immediate pain management, and many people have undergone deep surgeries, all kinds of surgeries with hypnosis as the only anesthetic. Generally, that's done if the person is allergic to chemical anesthetic. And generally, there's a training process. They might have 12 sessions or so where they learn and get really good at hypnosis, and you sort of train your body to not feel the pain. And then the other main use is sort of a longer term hypnosis training for chronic pain, where you teach your body not to feel pain in general, or you can turn it off in general, and that requires more training. With the first one, the hypnotherapist would be there in the room with you, and you'd be under hypnosis and be making sure that you don't feel any pain, kind of like anesthesia, except with hypnosis. And then the other way would be, if somebody has chronic pain, back pain, something like that, they can work with a hypnotherapist over a period of time, and they could learn to shut off the pain and block the pain mentally. Of course, you would generally only do that if all physical measures are being taken care of. You wouldn't, I just broke my arm. I haven't been to the ER yet, but I want to use hypnosis to take the pain away. Obviously, you would not do that. You make sure that the physical problem is taken care of first. And then once that person is cleared and everything physical that can be done is being done, then you can do hypnosis for the pain relief. It's really, it works similarly to a pain medication, except you can actually train your body to shut off pain without medication. So you actually can, whereas the pain medication you'd have to keep taking, the hypnosis is just a training process, and then you could stop after a while and you would have the skill of turning off the pain. So, yeah.
Could you use hypnosis, emergency medical services, like if somebody got hit under a tree, if somebody's stuck under a car, or can hypnosis
absolutely
be used in that situation?
Yep, absolutely. And people can actually have a number of complications just from the shock. So it's much better to have people relax. So the main situation, which I'm actually certified in, is if someone is in a traumatic situation, and it'll be a little while before the paramedics can get there, you can, and this is one of the few really useful uses of instant hypnosis. You can actually put someone in hypnosis in a few seconds using certain techniques, and that really can happen. It's not as useful for therapeutic purposes. Like it's better to take your time and really get a good state if you have an hour. But if you need to get someone into hypnosis in 10 or 15 seconds, there are certainly ways to do that. So if someone is in an accident and they're waiting for the paramedics and they're in a lot of pain, that is definitely a very good use for that, to keep them from going into shock, for example. Mm-hmm. So absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like half the things, I can't even tell people half the things I do because people wouldn't believe me. I mean, it's like, that's a miracle. That could never happen. So I have to start off slow. Like, I helped Uncle Tom quit smoking with hypnosis. We have to start off slow before we get into the things that seem almost magical or miraculous. I don't even tell most of the people most of the crazy things that I've done with hypnosis. Okay. So good. Okay. Let's see. Couple more questions, and this is a relevant one from Alfred. How deep do you have to go into hypnosis for it to work? And that's a very good question, and that there's different answers based on what the problem or the therapy is. If for things that are primarily cognitive, like in this thinking, feeling, behaving spectrum that we're talking about, anxiety, quitting smoking, losing weight, behavioral or cognitive or emotional changes, those kind of things, really a very light state of hypnosis is all that's necessary. And there's not that much use for a very deep state of hypnosis. If you have a light to mid state, you can get everything done that you need to get done. The only exception is the two main ones that are usually cited are memory, recollection, and pain management. And so it's kind of like with, like normal, like cognitive and feeling and behavioral type things, there's diminishing returns after a medium level of hypnosis. So if you go deeper than that, there's greatly diminishing returns at that point. The the soft cap for those diminishing returns is farther along for pain management and memory. So you can, a deeper level of hypnosis is more useful for being able to remember something better, or being able to block out or manage or learn to manage pain. So a deep state is usually not needed for most things, but for a couple things it is useful. That's kind of the short answer.
That's interesting.
So,
I learned something new today.
Yes, good. Well, hopefully everyone did. So, okay, and let's see. We have a bunch of other questions, but I think we're kind of running out of time for today. Did you have anything else before we?
No, I think I've asked a couple of questions that I wasn't expecting to ask.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining in, and we will look forward to seeing you next week on episode 4 of Hypnosis Chat.